Welcome to Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. I'm Peter Gross, co-host of the original Wild Kingdom with Marlin, Perkins and Jim Fowler. Most of us have seen movies or television shows where sharks have been portrayed as marauders who prey on unsuspecting swimmers or smaller fish in the sea. But many Wild Kingdom episodes illustrate how sharks and other predators are an important part of the food chain in our underwater world. Oceans cover 70% of our planet, yet we still have much to learn about this important ecosystem. Modern technology has enhanced our ability to study the oceans with minimal disruption to their habitat. Human involvement and recent legislation to protect underwater creatures allow for the resurgence of these many species. There's more good news to come in the Wild Kingdom, so sit back and enjoy Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom.
In the Wild Kingdom, the porpoise, blindfolded, listens to his own voice to find his way. Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. From Chicago's famed Lincoln Park Zoo, here is Marlin Perkins to probe the mysteries of sonar in the wild.
Hello, welcome to Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. Today we will examine some animals who rely on an echo to find their way around. Not this little coati mundi, member of the raccoon family from tropical America, who has such a keen sense of smell that he relies upon that to find all sorts of things. Whoop, did I hold you too tightly? Well, come on down here, right down here. That's right. I put a grape in my shirt pocket. And if you can find that shirt pocket and how to get into it, I think he's already discovered it. Okay. So he found that grape in my pocket with his wonderful sense of smell. Let's go into the laboratory now and examine an animal who relies primarily on his sense of hearing, a fennec or desert fox, who lives around the edges of the Sahara Desert and in Asia Minor. The fennec's ears are so good and their hearing is so acute that they actually hunt with it, and they hear the muffled sounds of mice in their burrows underground. Jim, let's test that with a little squeaky mouse here that I'll squeak softly.
Boy, he sure perked up at that.
Heard it all right, huh? Now I'll move quietly behind the cage and see if you can hear that.
He knows right where you are, Marlin. He'd be a hard one to sneak up on.
Well, you try it on that side. I'll watch.
Well, I'll put it right behind him this time.
Yeah, you see, he even moved his ears independently. You watched him change direction with his ears to follow the action of those sounds. But what he was doing was hearing the sounds themselves, not an echo. Some animals actually use echoes to find their way around. This is an echo chamber device. And with this, I'm going to make an echo in very much the same way that you would if you were standing in a canyon and called and listened to your own voice rebound from the canyon walls. Jim Fowler. That's the way an echo sounds. Those waves are invisible, but I think I can show you what they'd look like if you could see them. By dropping a drop of water into a pan of water and watching the waves created go to the edge of the pan and rebound to the center. The transmission of sound waves through either air or water and measuring the time it takes for them to return is known as echolocation. This same system underwater is called sonar. We use sonar in locating objects underwater. For example, Jim, I'm going to need your help here. All our submarines are equipped with sonar. And when they send out the sound waves, they rebound from a submarine right back to the original one. We know where our enemy submarines are. Now, porpoises use exactly the same system by sending out sound waves underwater to their enemy, the shark, and they rebound back to the porpoise, and he knows exactly where his enemy, the shark, is. Recently, at the Marine Land Studios in Florida, in a series of tests, we proved that porpoises use sonar. Marineland, Florida is famous for its trained porpoises. Dr. Glenn Wood, curator of Marineland, the porpoises trainer, and myself recently conducted an experiment in which a blindfolded porpoise was put through an underwater obstacle course to test the porpoise's use of underwater echoes, or sonar. In order to blindfold the porpoise, rubber suction cups were used made from a special plaster mold. The cups were tested again and again to make certain they wouldn't irritate the porpoise's eyes. In fact, they were tested on Dr. Glenn Wood's own eyes even before the porpoise had a chance to wear them. Then, over a short period of time, the porpoise was trained to accept the suction cups. To test the porpoise's ability to avoid obstacles it couldn't see, we installed regularly spaced vertical bars which the porpoise would have to dodge. The pool in which the obstacle was placed is a saltwater pool, since the porpoise is a mammal that lives in the ocean. In order to record the porpoise's underwater sounds, a watertight microphone called a hydrophone was lowered into the pool, connected to a tape recorder. When a porpoise is merely loitering, it emits a high-pitched, wavering squeal, somewhat like a toy siren. When it closes in on food, the siren-like squeal changes to short bursts of noise which resemble the creaking of a rusty hinge. In order to persuade the porpoise to swim through the obstacle course, we had to condition it with a piece of fish and signal by tapping a bit of metal against the edge of the tank at the far end of the pool. In response to the food and the signal, the blindfolded porpoise successfully avoided the obstacle as it swam the length of the pool and returned to be rewarded with another piece of fish. We decided to make the test even harder by placing a second obstacle in the water. It's interesting to note that in clear water, a porpoise will use its eyesight as well as sonar, but in dark water or when blindfolded, it will use sonar alone, finding its way about by means of echoes. As the porpoise prepares to go through this obstacle, let's listen to these echoes which sound like the creaking of a rusty hinge. The porpoise successfully avoided 2 rows of obstacles and returned just as hungry as before. Placing a third obstacle would be the final test. And the porpoise passed with flying colors.
Well, how'd they get the porpoise to accept those suction cups, Marlin?
Well, first they call the porpoise to them, and when he comes, they give them a food reward. Pretty soon, the porpoise will put his head in their lap, and every time he does, he gets a reward. Eventually, the porpoise will learn to accept the suction cups over his eyes, because by that time, he has complete confidence in his trainer. We've just seen how porpoises use sonar underwater to find their way around and even to locate food when they can't see. Sonar is the sending out of high-frequency sound waves underwater and measuring the time it takes them to come back to the sender. Bats also send out high-frequency sound waves, but they send them out through the air. And their echolocation system is even more precise than that of porpoises. To prove this, here is a film, a high-speed, slow-motion film, taken at the Lincoln Laboratories of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology by Mr. Fred Webster. These bats in this film are catching food particles in the air. As you can see, a bat's echolocation is very accurate. That's why the United States government is interested in these tiny animals and their ability to echolocate. Also, they're interested in their homing instinct. Bats' ability to return over great distances of unknown territory to a precise point. To test the homing instinct of bats, Professor James Cope of Earlham College and Jim Fowler collected some bats in a cave in Kentucky and released them at a point 100 miles away to see if they'd return to the cave. But Jim, that's your story.
We began our study at Earlham College in Richmond, Indiana. This college is well known for its contributions to scientific research. In one of the laboratories, I worked with Professor Jim Cope in preparing identification bands to be coated with a special radioactive material. Even in the darkest recesses of a cave, we would be able to quickly locate any bat wearing one of these radioactive bands by using a Geiger counter. Applying the radioactive coating is a delicate operation. You have to work with a mirror and behind a thick lead shield. When the bands were completed, we sealed them in a heavy lead container to carry them out into the field. Next, we had to capture some bats, and that meant going after them in their own underground world. A cave is a forbidding place, cold, dark, and damp, where the only natural sound is the sound of running water. After our eyes adjusted to the dark, the first creature we saw was a small salamander. This salamander thrives only in the wetness of a cave and seldom ventures out of its world of absolute blackness. As you'd expect, an underground river supports its own unique population. The fishing is good because nobody fishes here. One interesting specimen we caught was a blind fish. After generations of living in total darkness, this species has lost all of its sense of sight. As interesting as these animals were, we were here to hunt bats, so we moved deeper into the cave. We found the bats formed in an interesting pattern on the roof of the cave. In hibernation, they crowd together to make use of the best hanging places, which are the crevices in the rock of the cave. They hang head down, and because they were dormant, capturing them was easy. When we had enough specimens, we took them to our car to transport them to a place 100 miles from the cave. It was night by the time we had traveled 100 miles. And now came the crucial part of our experiment. The radioactive bands we had brought from the laboratory at Earlham had to be gingerly taken out and clipped to the wings of the bats. Thus our bats were identified so that when we went back to the cave, we would be able to determine whether they had returned. One by one, the banded bats were released. After releasing the bats, we went back to the cave a few days later with Geiger counters to see how many had returned. A return that involved a flight of over 100 miles in complete darkness. The Geiger counters picked up the radioactivity of the identification bands and led us straight to our test animals. We had no trouble picking them out of the crowd, and our final count showed that about 80% of the bats we released had made that 100-mile journey and returned to this very cave from which we took them. But the big question still remained. How did they do it?
It's an intriguing question how bats can return to a cave from a distance of 100 miles away. It's obviously some form of homing instinct, and about this we know very little. But we do know that once they get near the cave, they echolocate their way inside by sending out sound impulses that we can't even hear, but that they can hear by having them rebound from the walls of the cave back to their ears. This is very similar to the echolocation of porpoises, except that that's called sonar because it's underwater, and this is echolocation in the air. It's also similar to radar, which send radio impulses out from a sending station to a plane, and those are then rebounded to a receiving station and then down to a computer. The man who knows more about echolocation in bats than anyone else I know is Professor James Cope of Earlham College, and we're glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Professor Cope, what are the frequency ranges of the inaudible sounds of bats?
Well, they range from around 20,000 cycles per second all the way up to 130,000 cycles per second.
And are these, can you actually record these?
Oh, yes. On this oscilloscope here, we can. Jim can bring in a bat here. We've got one that is very noisy.
Noisy.
Yes. And you can note now he's making an audible sound, and he, along with our voices, is being recorded on the oscilloscope. But if we stop and let him calm down, which he's doing now, you can see that his lips are moving and is producing a sound that is above our hearing. And if we'll stop and listen for a minute, we can see this on the oscilloscope. Marlin, turn up that amplifier converter to 32 so we can hear these bats sound.
Well, that's an intriguing thing. You know, there are some other animals that have the ability to echolocate besides bats and porpoises.
Yes, the oil bird from South America is one.
Yes. You know, there are many intriguing things about animals, and the homing instinct is one to me.
Yes, indeed.
Even some of our common animals, like dogs and cats, have this ability to a remarkable degree. We've all heard stories about how dogs and cats have been lost and have found their way back home weeks or months later over territory that they've never seen before. I don't know whether this little cat has the ability to echolocate its way around or not, but I certainly know that full-grown cats have a remarkable ability to take care of themselves and their welfare. And we certainly have the ability to take care of our welfare with a good health insurance plan. We're ready now to conduct some experiments to show that bats echolocate nearly 100% in order to find their way about. As a former student of Professor Cope, Jim Fowler is fully acquainted with his experiments at Earlham College on bats and has built here a bat flight cage in order to test them. Jim, how are you going to carry out the experiments?
Well, I think, first of all, this is about the best experiment that I know of to really show that bats use echolocation and not their other senses when they find obstacles. Now, the flight cage is built with very smooth walls, so when we release a bat, he eventually has to fly out through these obstacles. These are slightly narrower than the wingspread of the bat that we're going to use.
Yes, the big brown bat has a wingspan of about 14 inches.
Right, and these are 10 inches
yes,
wide.
That's right.
So the bat will actually have to turn on his side to get through. Right. The microphone is to pick up the inaudible sound waves that the bat's emitting, and we can convert this and therefore hear it.
This over here, we can use this to make the sounds audible, you see.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're going to use 3 bats. The first bat will be normal. It can still see and it can still hear, and therefore it should be able to fly around and eventually pass through the obstacle without touching it. The second bat will have its eyes blindfolded, but he can still echolocate, so he should be able to pass through the obstacle also. The third bat, we're going to really fix him. We're going to blindfold him and plug his ears, so he'll be completely fouled up. He should hit the wall or hit one of these obstacles and fall to the ground.
Well, don't you really think those wires are a little too narrow to be echolocated?
Oh, no. This species of bat, the big brown bat, is capable of echolocating a wire, about the size of a human hair.
My.
Yes. So, Jim, let's get a bat out of here and just see what we can do with one of these. That's a good one. Notice, Marlin, that's okay. It doesn't have anything over its eyes, nothing in its ears, just a normal bat.
Is he scolding?
Yes, he is. He's irritated by Jim's handling. Soon he will quiet down, and you'll note that his mouth is moving, his ears are twitching, and he's feeling its way around in the room by these echolocations. Now, just listen for a minute.
Well, he certainly got through that one all right.
He sure did. That was a good shot.
Yeah. Well, let's blindfold one now.
All right. Let me get my gloves on here. I don't want to get bitten by this fellow.
All right.
Oh, yeah, here's one. Here's one that, nothing on it here. Now we can just get down here. Have you got your little tabs ready to...
Yeah, I'll get my glasses on so I can see.
All right, I'll
I got
hold in
some
there.
little tabs made out of adhesive tape, just
All
like
right, just press it right on its eye there.
All right.
That's good. Now we'll turn it over. I'll try to grab its mouth here.
Yeah.
There.
There we go.
Can you get that on?
Yep.
Fine.
All set.
Now, how does that look there?
Well, I'm sure he can't see anything.
I don't think he can either. He's completely blind. All right, we'll give it over here to Jim. Jim, try her out. See what she does.
When you hear a change in the sound he's making, he'll be echolocating.
Well, that blindfolded one got through as well as the other one.
I think it did, yes.
Now let's see that same action in slow motion. You got one ready?
Yes, I have one right in here. It already has its blindfolds on. That's good. Jim?
Try him through there. Notice how the speed of his signal increases as he approaches an obstacle. Ha! He wasn't quite sure that time. He's going to try again. Boy, he's made it. He navigated that one perfectly.
And now for the final test. A blindfolded bat with plugs in his ears.
I have one here, Marlin. Let's check on this. Blindfolds seem to be okay.
Yeah.
Earplugs.
Let me tack that one in.
All right. This other one seems to be okay. Jim, let's give it the works.
Wow, right into the wall.
Marlin, this proves to me that bats need their ecosystem to find their way about.
Yeah, to me too. You might think that bats, as nocturnal animals, would have good nighttime vision. This just isn't so. Perhaps they don't need it. But most nocturnal animals do have good vision at nighttime, like this little galago right over here. Unlike the bat, which uses echolocation for protection, the galago uses his eyes for protection. I want to thank Professor Cope for showing us how a bat can make its way through an obstacle course even though blindfolded. As we've seen, we have a lot to learn from animals. Despite all our technical skills, man-made echolocation and sonar devices are extremely crude compared to those used by porpoises and bats. Nature is as full of mysteries as a detective story and has spent millions of years perfecting its methods. Man can't expect to unravel overnight all the secrets of the wild kingdom.